Welcome everyone. Hello, hello. Just giving it a few as folks are jumping on in. Hope everyone is having a good evening, wherever you might be. Welcome in, welcome in. Just giving it a few as folks are trickling in. Give me a sec as I will share my screen here. Awesome, awesome. Cool, cool. Welcome in, folks. Welcome in. Just making sure. Cool, cool, cool.
Hey, show me you can handle your response.
Let me do that. There we go. Welcome in, folks. We're still letting folks trickle in, as I'm sure that there are going to be some more folks joining us here tonight. It's really awesome to have folks here for our Writing Your Debt Story workshop part 2. I know a number of folks had probably joined us last week, or maybe there's even some folks who hadn't, and we'll definitely talk through some stuff in a sec. I just wanted to flag of we are recording. I will say we're going to spend some time in breakout rooms that will not at all be recorded, so to make sure folks can share their stories and such. And we'll be, using this to be able to share out with others, especially some of the, really awesome like tips and discussion that we, kind of have about, sharing your story, about, finishing editing and, giving feedback and many of those awesome things. We're just giving it probably a few more minutes as folks trickle in, but as everyone's coming in, just again, welcome back for those who might have joined us last week, and welcome, for those who might be joining for the first time. My name is Nick Marcil, he, him. I'm an organizer with the Debt Collective, and I would love, love, love if folks want to share in the chat, maybe, where you're joining from, and also maybe something that is bringing you joy, like or hope this week, as well. If you joined in last week, want to know that, or if this is the first of the 2 workshops that you've come into, let us know that as well. That we can kind of see whether or not folks had joined in part 1 or are just coming in for part 2. But feel free to throw those in the chat as I see. Okay, awesome. Hey Bear. Hey Trisha. Awesome, awesome. Hey Sarah. Great, 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 great to see folks. And something as well that I always like to say, if you were in a space or place and able to come on camera, that is awesome. Totally understand if you don't want to. And certainly as far as the recording of things, it's just the screen itself, like the screen share, and then whomever is speaking. So, just myself there. So, but great to see people's faces and spaces. And as folks are still tossing things in the chat, again, welcome in. Feel free to share in, where you're joining from, and maybe something that is like bringing you joy or hope this week. Really great to see folks. Oh, that's awesome, Sarah. I'm glad we're there. And yeah, awesome, Casey. Good to see you again. Cool, cool. All right. I think we're pretty good, and maybe we'll jump over to talk about the agenda, and I will pass it over to Kristin.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm Kristin, and I am a member of the Debt Collective, and a writer and educator, and helped facilitate the workshop last week. So welcome back for folks who came, and welcome for the first time for folks who are joining us now. So just to kind of recap from last week we talked about some of the kind of guiding questions we might ask ourselves to begin to structure a story about debt. And we thought about if we'd like to write something long or something short. And then folks went home over the week and were supposed to think a little bit about what they'd like to say and how they might structure it. And then if they had the time, perhaps write a draft. And so wherever you are in the writing process tonight, whether it's just kind of thinking about stuff still or you have a draft, hopefully we will have structured the work time in such a way that you can get something out of tonight. So for the agenda tonight, we're going to take the temperature, kind of see where everyone's at within the writing process. We're going to spend most of our time in small groups, breaking out in probably about 3 groups. And I have some questions and kind of a structure to go through to talk about the work that you've done and receive targeted and meaningful feedback. And then from there, we'll jump back in and we'll talk about how you might submit this. And I said, we'll look at op-ed submissions first and then look at long form essay submissions if you want to write something longer. And then we'll have a little time for questions at the end of the session. So yeah, we can move on to the next slide. So I want to kind of hear what everyone is with their debt story. So 1, you've thought about it, but haven't written anything. 2, you've written something or maybe have an outline. 3, you have a mostly complete draft, or 4, you have a complete draft. And you just want to drop the number in the chat. We can kind of see kind of where we're all at tonight. Cool. So seeing numbers kind of all across the board, which is great. It looks like, yeah, some folks have a little bit written, and at least everyone's thought about it. And so I think that will be really perfect for tonight. Okay, we can flip the slides. And no shame in not getting anything done over the last week, because we all have a lot going on. So what's going to happen is we're going to get into groups of about 4 in a couple minutes. And what we're going to do is kind of decide who's willing to kind of be in the hot seat first. And so if you were the person who's sharing, you're going to start by talking a little bit about what work did you do since last week. Maybe you did no work since last week. That's totally fine. There's no shame there. You can share a little bit about that. Where are you at the process, and how are you feeling about your work? Next, I want you to explain to the people in your group what kind of feedback would be helpful today. Maybe you're at a place in the process where all you really need is some encouragement. You don't necessarily want targeted feedback on how you might think about things differently. Maybe you don't want feedback about structure or argument yet, because you just want to be told that you can do it, because it's hard to write something. And that's great. You should tell your group that so they know what.
That's not even fucking true.
Then share your work. So you can, if you have a little bit of a draft today or all of a draft, you can read that. If you have some brainstorming, you could kind of talk through your brainstorming, or if you have an outline, you could kind of walk through how you think you're going to order your essay. Once you're done sharing, then your group members are going to offer you a little bit of feedback based on what you've said. So if your group member has obviously said they just like a little bit of encouragement, that's what you should offer. If they've asked for something else, you should offer that. If someone is kind of open to lots of different feedback, then I've structured some questions here that you might think about answering to support them. So what is their main argument? Do you have any ideas to strengthen that? Is there any additional information about the writer's story that could be helpful? Is there any information that could be too technical or in the weeds? Do you think it should be clarified or deleted? How is the beginning working right now? Any ideas to strengthen it? And what other ideas do you have? So if the writer is kind of open to lots of feedback, here's kind of a bank of questions that you might talk about as a group. And yeah, and you can kind of go back and forth and have some conversations. So writers, feel free to ask lots of questions of the people who are in your group to help kind of troubleshoot some challenges in your writing. And then when you feel like you've gotten some good feedback and you're ready to move on, we'll switch and we'll move on to the next group member. Any questions about this process before Nick breaks this out into groups? Okay, it looks like I'm not seeing any questions right now. Nick and I will kind of be hopping around and jumping in and supporting as well. We imagine we'll have about 25 or 30 minutes for this, but we'll kind of pop around and see how the timing is. If your group finishes early, you can hop back into kind of the main room, so we'll know you're done. Or you can just kind of chat and get to know each other. That's a cool way to spend time too. So the last thing is we do have a document that outlines this process for you, so that you don't have to have the slides pulled up. So I'm going to drop this in the chat right now, and then you can have that up with you when you are in groups talking with folks.
So make sure, feel free to grab that document that Kristin just put in there. Kristin and I will jump between the couple of different groups that we have and can make sure to pop it out to folks, but just want to make sure. So I have one more person who's just jumping in, but I'm going to just open up these rooms and we will be jumping around to check in. All right.
Yeah, I wanted to start by just thanking everyone for sharing or for reflecting on someone else's story. And I just heard so many, brave stories. And I think sharing your work is a brave act too. And so I really thank you for that. I wanted to just open up maybe for like 5-ish minutes to reflect a little bit on the workshop experience. And so you could kind of share any of the answers to any of these questions or something else that comes to mind. What's something moving or compelling you heard during small group workshops? what useful feedback did you receive? Where do you want to go from here? What support do you need going forward? So I'd love to hear from, a handful of people about a little bit about that experience. And you're welcome to just jump in. And then if we get more than one hand, people can kind of put their name in the chat and we can kind of go from there. Hey, Sandy, go for it. Oh, sorry, Sarah. I can't see that well.
I just wanted to say the breakout groups are great because you hear so many people's stories, and the people that were in my group are just doing amazing work in this debt area, and they have stories to tell that are really, really compelling. And it's just kind of amazing to be able to be in a space where we're going to be able to have some tools to tell that story in a really compelling way. And that's really terrific. And the other thing I wanted to say was just, the workshop has been fabulous. And I'm wondering if you could share on the last workshop you had those, and I didn't save it, and I wish I had, but the example articles that you posted, and they were really I thought great examples of like what I'm trying to write. And I'm wondering if it would be okay to share that with some of the other groups I'm in, like my Indivisible group or my 5051 group, if that would be a document that would be okay to share.
Yeah, I just saw that Nick said that it might have been in the recap, but if it wasn't, we'll send another recap tomorrow, and we can add.
Oh,
add the
okay. I
folder
didn't look in there.
Yep, and we could. Yeah, thank you. That's such a great question, and I do think having examples of essays that feel like good models, or that can be a really great way to help to structure and inform your own work. So thank you for bringing those back up again.
They were great.
Anyone else willing to share a little bit about the workshop experience, or what kind of support they'd like going forward?
Well, maybe I'll ask folks if you just take 1 second to think and just type in the chat. Maybe it's just like an answer to that first question of, what is something that's moving or that was like compelling that you heard during that small group workshop. Maybe it was something as far as feedback about someone's story or even your own. Maybe it was just some of the discussion going on about what writing these stories sometimes feels like, or whatever other kind of emotions and things that kind of come up with that. So just take a second, toss something in the chat of what in particular came to mind that was moving or compelling from this. Okay, yeah, I'm loving that, Claire. I know, yeah. Maren had talked about that, the healthy boundaries with institutions. That was, a really great piece. Maren, I don't know if you want to speak to that, and also again keep on chiming in the chat if folks want to first.
Speak to it, repeat it?
Yeah, feel free if you want to, repeat some of that point in particular, what more that you were, talking about when sharing that sort of what do you mean by those healthy boundaries with institutions?
So in context, I was talking about how I filed for bankruptcy this year. And well, since last year, I just, stopped being intimidated by the institutions. I was like, I don't have anything. I've been unemployed for 2 years. I have no money. I've got nothing for you. You can come at me, but what? We gonna break my kneecaps? That's not the country we live in yet. And anyway, so I was thinking about how millennials, whoa, this is doing the Zoom thing again. I gotta figure this out. Millennials, we've been so well therapized. We're learning our boundaries, we're standing up for ourselves, this kind of thing. We need to do it with institutions as well. Government institutions, corporations, whatever, like say no to them. They intimidate us into giving our money to them, and we don't have to, actually.
No, I love that, Maren. And also just chiming in of, yeah, some of the other things of folks saying, I think, yeah, Sarah saying, I'm a bit older than others in my group, continually inspired by the ways of sticking up for yourself against injustice.
I
Oh,
also
and then
wanted to
go ahead.
note that Cassandra, I think, shared earlier that they would be willing to share a little bit about a reflection or something that came out of group. I think I saw your name on there earlier, Cassandra. And if you change your mind, no worries. But if you'd like to share, I want to make sure you have this space.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in the workshop that I was in, I got some great feedback, great, phenomenal feedback. And then when the others in my group, shared their stories, it, it was phenomenal. Both of them were great. One of them was so well written that we commented on the fact that it was almost like seeing a movie in her head because she had it so well written, and it was very, very moving. Yeah, so it was wonderful. I got wonderful feedback on mine, good. I call it critique because it wasn't criticism, it was critique as to how I can make it better, which is what I was looking for. And then, yeah, both of them had such great stories to tell that I personally could not think of anything else to embellish or to make it better for both of their stories because they were just wonderful as written. But yeah, it was just phenomenal. So that's what I want to say.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think I saw someone else go off mute. I saw that there is some talk about a signal group, which I think would be a wonderful place for us to be able to continue to share support and resources. And I think I saw Nick commit to making one for us. So I think that's a really wonderful idea. And then we can kind of continue to talk about this work and have more opportunities to share going forward and ask each other questions and support one another as we move through the writing process. And I know for me, at least, writing can feel kind of isolating sometimes when I don't have the opportunity to continue to be in conversation with other people. So I want to talk a little bit about publication now, and then we'll have some more time for questions at the end if folks want to do that. So if you want to flip the slide, Nick. So I think there are sort of two main publication pathways, and those are, layered, and there's offshoots, but I think it's worth kind of thinking about two directions you could go in. So the first is one that you probably are familiar with, and it's the opportunity to publish an op-ed. So some things to think about. There's lots of outlets that publish these. You tend to have quicker response times to these. You tend to know more quickly if they're going to take it or not. Although sometimes you do have to follow up, but it tends to be a little bit faster just because often op-eds are kind of tethered to something in the news cycle. And so people know pretty quickly whether they want to publish it or not. I created at a different debt collective experience an op-ed brainstorming and outlining document that is linked on the PowerPoint slides, and I can send it in the chat later or send it along with the email recap tomorrow. But I have a document that kind of can take you through the brainstorming experience, kind of ask you about all the different pieces of an op-ed and help you think about how to structure it. So if you're interested in op-ed, that might be a resource to support you if you'd like that kind of support. Some other things to think about, I think it's worth submitting to outlets that you actually write, like, and read. And you should, of course, think about the big ones, aim high if you want to, but also think about your local outlets. Sometimes, your local newspaper might be more willing to read your op-ed because you're from the community, especially if you have something to say that kind of connects the community. So I suggest that. Most journals will have a pitch section, and you should consult that before sending out your op-ed pitch. Some people want just kind of a paragraph outlining what it is that you'd like to argue. Some people actually want you to include a draft of your op-ed at the bottom. Some people want you to kind of introduce yourself. So it's worth familiarizing yourself with what they want from you. And then finally, there are some other venues that I especially want to draw your attention to. The Debt Collective members have submitted to in the past. And so Truth Out in these times. And then there is a Debt Collective Substack now which maybe Nick, you could say a little bit about what you know about that.
Yeah, so I will firstly check and see folks in here. If you can, toss a one in the chat if you maybe have heard of Substack or follow a Substack or anything like that. I see a number of folks. If you can, throw a two in the chat if you have started to follow the Debt Collective Substack. And I also know that there are, like other kind of like alternatives and such as well. But I was going to flag to say that the Debt Collective Substack, which some folks in here might have joined just last week as well, there was a like a Jubilee School session that Maddie did. Kind of the mastermind, if you will, behind a lot of the Substack. And I'm going to toss in a sec the link, or unless Kristin, can you do so? But there is a link if you're interested at all. Maybe you have your debt story, like somewhat together. Maybe you still have some ways to go with it. But there is this link, which is basically just like a Google form, where you can answer a few questions and then maybe, submit your story. Maybe you have it in like the way of like an op-ed, or, maybe just like a short kind of like letter to the editor kind of thing. Or maybe you even have it as something that's more of like, I don't know, it could be like a poem or spoken word or like something like that. So definitely check out the link that I know Kristin threw in the chat. And consider filling that out. I do want to note to folks that give Maddie a little bit of time. It might take like a couple weeks for her to get back, depending on like how many submissions and things. And again, kind of like the frequency of posting with the Substack. But that is definitely an awesome place and space for folks to potentially have some of their writing and their story shared. But yeah, as Kristin said, that there's certainly a whole host of different like ideas and ways of how you could maybe publish what you have written now, or what more that you want to work on it.
Thank you for that. Yeah, the Debt Collective Substack is awesome. I also included in the chat a link just to the actual Substack, so you could get a sense of the voice and a little bit of just the vision for the space based on some of the stuff they've already published. And then I also gave you a link to the op-ed brainstorming and outlining document in case that support would be useful for you. Okay, you can flip the slides. So a couple other things to think about with op-eds. Most journals don't want you to submit somewhere else while they have your pitch. So they'll let you know usually on the website if that's true, but often if you're sending it out somewhere, you kind of got to wait a week or so, and then you can kind of ping them again and say you're kind of moving on and submitting elsewhere. So just something to kind of think about. And then also, if they don't remind you on the website, they really like it when you hyperlink all the sources that support the facts that you have in your op-ed. So that's just couple other notes on that. Okay, we can keep going. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to read this entire thing for you, but this was a pitch that I gave for an op-ed that I published in Truth Out. I think it was last year, maybe it was a couple years ago. And so I just wanted to offer that in case you've never had it, like written a pitch before. I think it can be really helpful to take a look at someone else's, and it moves from the kind of sort of like national news relevance into my argument. And then I talk a little bit about myself and why I'm kind of the right person to write it at the end. And so this is just something that you can read. If you'd like some support in writing your pitch, you can take a look at that later. Okay, we can keep going. And then I think the other publication pathway is to write something long form. And this can this long form bucket kind of holds lots of different genres. So it can be something that is primarily a personal essay and memoir, and that can lean a little bit argumentative or not. And then you can also have something that feels like a little bit more reported and journalistic that maybe weaves in some memoir. And so there's kind of a spectrum, and long form kind of contains all of that. And so if you know you want to write a very long story, or you want a bunch of research in it and you have a lot to say, then I think going this long form route is really good. I have a link on here to a search engine that features journals that are open to receiving nonfiction on personal writing right now. And sometimes you can search that under the bucket of creative nonfiction as well. And so I think kind of taking a look at those and seeing which titles might be familiar to you, and the kind of length kind of restrictions they have on that can be really useful as you move through the writing process. For these journals, you might not hear back at all, or it might be like 8 months or something. And so this, if you're going this route, you're really in it for the long game, and you're looking to play something that isn't entirely only timely, and that you're okay kind of waiting. Most of them do allow simultaneous submissions, so you can kind of send out to maybe 5 or 6 places you really like. And then if you hear back from one place, you can go back in and withdraw your essay later. A lot of them have a submission portal, and they'll show you where to submit to on their website. I think it is helpful to take a look at the journal before you submit, just because if the kinds of stuff they're publishing sounds really different than what you're publishing, and you don't feel like yours is in conversation kind of tonally or subject wise with what they're doing, they probably aren't going to accept it, and you just don't, want to waste your time sending it there. And then I just said that this process can take a while, and you should be nice to yourself, because it can feel, I think, hard sometimes. And I think the Debt Collective's Signal is a really great place where we could talk about and give each other suggestions for places that we might send work to, since probably between all of us, we're reading a lot of different stuff. And I think for me, the most helpful thing has been hearing from a friend or someone who's familiar with my work, a place that they think that my work might belong. And so that's a great route to go as well. And then, yeah, we can flip the slides. So I wanted to create just a little time to see what questions that we can kind of answer while we're all together. Nick and I have our email addresses in the very last slide. And so we'll be happy to, kind of respond to follow-up questions later as you have them. But if there's any right now that you have that would be helpful, then we're here and we can talk about